There is a word that shows up on gravestones across the Scottish Highlands, worn smooth by 3 centuries of rain, that most descendants today cannot fully explain. A clan name, passed down as certainty. This is who you are, this is where you come from, this is your blood. But blood, it turns out, is more complicated than a name carved in stone. For generations, clan surnames were treated as almost sacred proof of shared ancestry. A MacDonald was descended from MacDonalds, a Campbell from Campbells, in an unbroken line stretching back to some founding chieftain lost in the mist of the medieval Highlands. It was a tidy story, loyal, romantic, and geneticists are now finding only partly true. Because when researchers began testing the Y chromosome DNA of men carrying the same rare clan surnames, expecting to confirm centuries of shared bloodline, what they found instead did not simply confirm the old story. It complicated it, split it. In some cases, it revealed something almost nobody expected, a genetic signal with no business being in the Highlands at all. This is the story of what 14 rare Scottish surnames may still be hiding in the DNA of the people who carry them today. If uncovering histories like this is the kind of thing you enjoy, consider staying with me, because there is far more buried in these names than any tartan ever told us. To understand why the DNA results were so unsettling, you first have to understand the story everyone believed. The traditional account of the Scottish clan system describes something close to an extended tribal family. A chief at the top, and beneath him, a web of kinsmen who shared, or believed they shared, descent from a common ancestor. Names like Mackenzie, Fraser, Gunn, and Sinclair were not just labels. They were declarations of belonging, tied to specific glens, castles, and territories, often stretching back to the 12th or 13th century. Historians have long explained that clan identity was, in part, genuinely genealogical, sons inheriting a surname from a father, generation after generation, exactly as the Y chromosome itself is inherited, silently, along the same paternal line. It was a story that made intuitive sense. A surname and a bloodline moving together through history, like 2 threads twisted into the same rope. And for a long time, that was where the explanation stopped. Reasonable. Stable. Almost too tidy to survive contact with the evidence. The first cracks did not come from genetics at all. They came from historians and clan researchers noticing something strange in the record itself. Certain clans, especially in the Highlands and the Isles, were known to have absorbed entire groups of unrelated families under one surname, not through blood, but through allegiance. A weaker family, seeking protection, might take the name of a powerful neighboring chief in exchange for military loyalty. Feuds, forced adoptions, and even simple convenience meant that by the 17th century, a single clan surname could already represent dozens of genuinely unrelated bloodlines, all marching under one banner. Historians had a name for this practice, but no way to measure how far it had actually gone. The paper trail simply could not tell you whether the man beside you in the clan muster roll was truly your cousin, or simply your neighbor who had taken your chief's name for safety. That uncertainty sat quietly for centuries, until DNA gave researchers a way to test it directly. The tool that reopened this question is the same one used in surname studies worldwide. The Y chromosome, passed almost unchanged from father to son, mutating only slowly across generations, tracking the same paternal path that a Scottish surname is meant to follow. In theory, if a clan surname reflects one true bloodline, unrelated men carrying that surname today should show closely related Y DNA markers, clustering into what geneticists call a single haplogroup lineage. Researchers running Y-DNA surname projects on clans such as the MacDonalds, the McFarlanes, and several smaller, rarer Highland names expected some divergence. History had already warned them that adoption and allegiance naming existed. What they did not expect was the scale of it. That was not a contradiction. It was a signal. For several of the surnames tested, researchers found not one dominant paternal lineage but several distinct, unrelated ones, existing side by side under the same clan name for centuries. Men who had grown up believing themselves genetic kin to their fellow clansmen carried Y-DNA markers that diverged so significantly the shared ancestor, if one existed at all, would have to be pushed back thousands of years before the clan system itself existed. The story did not collapse. It widened. What looked like a single bloodline was beginning to look like a layered political alliance, wearing the appearance of a family tree. If you are the kind of person who enjoys watching a tidy historical assumption come apart thread by thread, let me know in the comments which clan or surname you would want investigated next. 3 explanations now compete for how this actually happened, and researchers are careful not to declare one the final answer. The first is straightforward clan adoption, smaller or defeated families formally taking a stronger clan's surname in exchange for protection, a practice well documented in Highland history, which would naturally produce multiple unrelated Y-DNA lineages under one name within a few generations. The second is what geneticists sometimes call cultural absorption without genetic replacement, entire communities shifting their identity and surname to align with a dominant regional power, without any blood relationship ever being claimed or assumed, simply because survival depended on visible loyalty. The third, and the most quietly startling, involves what researchers describe as deeper, pre-clan lineages, Y-DNA signatures present in parts of Scotland long before the medieval clan system existed at all, carried by descendants of earlier Pictish, Gaelic, or even Norse settlers, later folded into a clan identity that had nothing to do with their actual paternal origin. None of these explanations cancels the others. Different surnames, the evidence suggests, likely carry different combinations of all 3. The most significant turning point came when researchers began comparing these modern Y-DNA surname clusters against a broader dataset, ancient and early medieval DNA recovered from burial sites across Scotland and the wider British Isles, alongside comparative samples from Scandinavia and Ireland. This was not a single dramatic press release. It was a slow accumulation of comparative genomic data, expanding what earlier, smaller surname studies could only guess at. And within that expanded comparison, one finding stood out. A cluster of men carrying a specific rare Highland surname, long assumed to be purely Gaelic in origin, carried a Y-DNA haplogroup whose closest ancient matches were not from Ireland or the Scottish mainland at all. They pointed toward Scandinavia. Not the region researchers expected. Not even the tradition the surname itself claimed. The clan's own oral history spoke of Gaelic chieftains and ancient Highland roots, yet the paternal genetic signal, preserved silently across 1,000 years, told a different origin story, one tied to the Norse raiders and settlers who occupied parts of the Hebrides and the northern coastline from the 9th century onward. The genome was not erasing the old clan story. It was revealing an older, stranger one hiding directly beneath it. A Norse founder, perhaps, whose descendants were fully absorbed into Gaelic culture within a few generations, until nothing but the DNA remembered where they had actually come from. Why does a detail like this matter beyond one surname, one clan, one family curiosity? Because it forces a much larger reconsideration of how identity actually forms. We like to imagine ancestry as a single, unbroken thread, one people, one land, one continuous bloodline reaching back into the mist. But the evidence emerging from Scottish surname genetics tells a messier, more human story. Populations moved, raided, settled, intermarried, switched allegiance when survival demanded it. A name that today feels like a fixed marker of belonging may have passed through Pictish tongues, Gaelic courts, Norse longships, and Lowland Scots bureaucracy, each layer reshaping who carried it and why, while the biological lineage underneath shifted in ways no oral tradition ever recorded. Picture the landscape these names were forged in. Steep glens cut by glacial ice, filled with mist that can swallow a hillside in minutes. Sea locks where longships once slid silently between islands, their crews raiding one season and settling the next. Stone keeps perched on cliffs, built not for comfort but for survival against neighbors who were, more often than legend admits, strangers wearing a familiar name. Winters brutal enough that a clan's survival depended less on bloodline purity and more on how many strong allies could be gathered under one banner, one name, one shared promise of protection. It is a landscape that rewarded alliance over ancestry, and the DNA, quietly, has kept that record even where the stories chose to forget it. So when someone asks whether a rare Scottish surname can reveal a hidden clan bloodline, the honest answer refuses to be simple, the way real scientific answers usually do. For some families, why DNA evidence increasingly supports a genuine shared paternal lineage stretching back centuries, sometimes longer than written clan records themselves. For others, the same surname sits atop several unrelated bloodlines, unified not by blood but by history, loyalty, and the sheer human need to belong to something larger than one family alone. The map is still incomplete. Researchers continue expanding ancient DNA comparisons across Scotland, Scandinavia, and Ireland, refining exactly how far these hidden lineages reach and how many clan names may be quietly built on more than one founding bloodline. What is already clear is enough to unsettle the assumption that a clan name was ever simply a bloodline. Perhaps that is the deeper truth this research keeps returning to. We inherit names believing they tell us exactly where we came from. But some of those names were never meant to be a genealogy at all. They were a promise, a shelter, an alliance forged in a hard landscape where survival mattered more than ancestry, and only now, 1,000 years later, is the quiet architecture of a single chromosome finally being asked to tell the truth the old stories left out. If this is the kind of history that stays with you long after the video ends, subscribe, because there is always another name, another bloodline, another buried thread still waiting to be followed.